Gentlemen, I have created this thing!
Euaoi.
Since Warner Brothers recently released the trailer for the Minecraft movie, the trailer itself has gathered a lot of dislikes on YouTube. The reason for those dislikes stem from Jack Black's portrayal of Steve looking nothing like the Steve from the video game, and the CG animals having a blocky and also realistic look to it, which just makes it look very uncanny. Which is why for this video, I'm going to be talking about Hollywood's obsession over live-action adaptations of fictional media. Because honestly, I don't know why the producers thought live-action was the perfect medium for a Minecraft movie. Or VFX with a sprinkle of live-action, to be exact. Traditional 3D animation like the ones in Pixar and DreamWorks films would have been a much better fit for the Minecraft movie than, well, this. It could even be a mix of live action and CGI, given the plot for this movie is about 4 misfits from the real world stumbling into the Minecraft universe. It could be live action when they're in the real world, and then switch to traditional 3D animation when they're in the Minecraft world. And unfortunately, this type of thing is only going to become more prevalent from here, since video game movies are becoming the new superhero movies, given the success of the Sonic the Hedgehog movies and the Super Mario Bros. Movie, among many others. And if you look at the list of upcoming films that are based on video games, you'll notice that there are a lot of them, with most of them being live action. Upcoming films based on video games include, but are not limited to, a Street Fighter movie, an Iron Lung movie, which is also going to be directed by Markiplier. You know what? Good for him. A Watch Dogs movie. And many other video game franchises that have movies in development, which include, but are not limited to, Bendy and the Ink Machine, Dead by Daylight, Duke Nukem, Eternal Champions, Gravity Rush, Jak and Daxter, Just Dance. I wish I was joking about that one. The Legend of Zelda, Metal Gear, Portal, Rabbids, Saints Row, Ghost Recon, Splinter Cell, Yakuza, and even a movie based on The Sims. Don't ask me how that's going to work. Even old arcade games are getting the silver screen treatment like Pac-Man and Space Invaders. There's even going to be a Talking Tom film. It almost reminds me of those video game movie trailer spoofs from the early days of YouTube, except this is not a joke or a skit. This is actually happening. Speaking of live action, all of those films I have listed earlier are confirmed to be live action. On the animation side, we only have 3 upcoming films. A sequel to the Super Mario Bros. Movie, a third Angry Birds movie, and a movie based on the adventure game Stray. One thing I should mention is that a good amount of those live-action video game movies I listed could easily work, if not be an improvement, if it were animated instead. While for some movies, such as the Bendy and the Ink Machine movie, it's currently unknown if that movie will either be animated or in live action. But it just makes sense if it were animated, given that the game's art style is inspired by 1920s and 1930s animation. While some movies like the Rabbids movie will be hybrid live action. What I think they mean by hybrid live action is that there are going to be CGI Rabbids interacting with human actors. At that point, just make the whole movie animated, because having those really cartoonish looking creatures interacting with real people would just feel off. Unless they give the Rabbids a more uncanny realistic look, which would just make the whole thing even worse. The Pac-Man and Space Invaders movies also don't need to be live action either, especially since Pac-Man has previously had 2 TV shows that were entirely animated. Unless they're taking the Pixels approach to those films, which is also a possibility. While I have nothing against live action, it's just that a lot of these video games getting film adaptations are either action games with a lot of violence and explosions, or take place in mystical fantasy worlds. And I feel like animation would be a better medium for a lot of these films. Why I believe that is because a live-action adaptation of those movies would involve a heavy usage of hyper-realistic CGI and other VFX effects just to try to make it work. And going based on the public's reception of the CGI and VFX usage in live action films today, it's probably not going to end well, especially in regards to the public reaction to the Minecraft movie trailer. While at first, it just doesn't make sense. We've had movies that are decades old and have CG effects that still hold up to this day, like Avatar, Jurassic Park, and Tron, just to name a few. So you would think that with the advancement of technology, that quality CG effects would be better than they were back then. When in reality, the opposite is true. CG effects have actually gotten worse in recent years, with examples of this being the 2023 Flash movie, the 2021 Black Widow movie, and the 2018 movie Skyscraper. This just leaves a question: why are VFX effects worse than they were decades ago? One answer that is usually brought up is that CGI and VFX are just overused, since CGI was originally created to add some touches to the movie to make the experience feel more immersive. But now, it's the main focus, and because of this, it takes away from traditional makeup effects, and it doesn't feel as authentic. To back up this claim, there is someone who is a VFX artist that works in the industry, Rasul Edgy, who has worked on films like Seeker, Transformers, Rise of the Beasts, and Sonic the Hedgehog 2, to add on to this reason. One of his reasons for the decline in VFX is that films go through a lot more changes during post-production than they did in the past, which leads to a massive strain and time crunch for the VFX artists. Rasul explains this by saying, "Clients continually change the brief. Shot design and planning are no longer a priority, and we have a lot more work to get through in a shorter amount of time." He further adds on to this by saying, "This means new work gets added to our plate and work we've already started and sometimes even finished gets scrapped. The fix it in post mentality also doesn't help." He then says that movies that use a lot of CG can be done right if it is planned well, changes aren't constantly made, and the VFX teams have enough time to create and refine it. Rasul isn't the only one to publicly speak out against this. There have been a bunch of VFX artists who spoke out against Marvel's unfair treatment of them. One Marvel VFX artist who chose to remain anonymous mentioned in a Vulture article that when he was working for Marvel, they had almost 6 months of overtime every day, with their work week averaging 64 hours on a good week. This worker even noted coworkers next to him that were breaking down crying and having anxiety attacks on the phone just from being overworked. This worker then adds on to Rasul's statement of post-production changes by saying, "The other thing with Marvel is it's famous for asking for lots of changes throughout the process. So you're already overworked, but then Marvel's asking for regular changes way in excess of what any other client does. And some of those changes are really major, maybe a month or two before a movie comes out. Marvel will have us change the entire third act. It has really tight turnaround times." This worker also mentions, when we're in post-production, we don't have a director of photography involved. So we're coming up with the shots a lot of the time. It causes a lot of incongruity. Now how does this factor in with Hollywood's live-action adaptation obsession problem? Well, here's how. Most live-action adaptations are adapting from sources of media that typically involve a lot of action, such as superhero movies and more recently, video game movies. Since VFX is becoming more common for showcasing the action from those movies, they tend to overuse CGI and VFX, which in turn creates a lot of burnout among VFX artists, which results in the CGI looking worse than it did in the past. While live-action adaptations of fictional media is not a new thing at all, it's just that the media that these film producers are choosing to adapt are the ones that require a lot of VFX to make it feel immersive. VFX artists are already feeling the strain from all these live-action superhero movies. Adding live-action video game movies to the mix will just only end up putting more of a strain on these artists, which in turn will result in more low-quality movies being churned out. To sum everything up, Hollywood's obsession with live-action adaptations is ruining the quality of action films in general by burning out the people who wield the technology and expertise to make it feel immersive. That's all I have for today, and I'll see you next time.